When I first tried to write Little Red Wolf, it lasted about 10 chapters of real story, and then I handed it to some friends of mine, and they were like, oh, this is really good, you have to write more. And I wrote another 10 chapters. And then the book was toast. It was dead. I had no idea where to go. And I was like, oh, shoot, what do I do? Well, I put it down, and I went to a different story, and then that story kind of petered out, and I looked around going, am I even going to be able to be an author? Am I going to be able to write books? Am I ever going to finish one of these stories? But I was in college at the time, so I was talking to a few of my professors, and I realized that the problem was I didn't have a backstory. I did not have a backstory for Selena, whose name was Scarlet at the time, which is why occasionally they call her my darling little Scarlet. It's a nod back to the original text. And so I had this whole thing where Scarlet didn't have a background. She literally was... the book originally began, once upon a time there was a little girl... Selena was never a good little girl, was basically, I think, the first, like the opening line of the sentence. Selena was never a good little girl. And then I went into all the stereotypical ways that she was just a rebellious little, little tyke. And so that, after a while, became her entire background, was that she was rebellious, she didn't go along with her dad, and she had a fight with him, and she left home and encountered the big bad wolf, who turned her into a werewolf, and away they go. Like, that was her background. It was a page and a half. And once the story completely died, I realized part of it was I didn't really know who my main character was. So I decided, let's give her a background. Let's give her a day in the life of. And so I went to a friend's house and talked to her about the project. She was a classmate of mine. And we activated our Google Docs, which was basically the first time I ever really used Google Docs. And what we did was we set up a shared file, and we started to write, line by line, the first part of Little Red Wolf. I would write a sentence, she would write a sentence. I would write a paragraph, she would read it and rewrite it. And the two of us went back and forth on this for the first few chapters until eventually the book caught fire and I was off to the races. You can really see it in the section where the fairy mist rolls in. Once the fairy mist rolls in, I am no longer going with training wheels. I am working completely on my own at that point. And the first part of the book is like that. Part 1, Little Red Wolf, Book 1. Selena has training wheels the whole time. Part 1 ends when she kisses her father on the cheek and says, "I love you, Daddy," and off she goes. And then from that point to Part 2, she's off on her own. She's encountering the Fairy Queen on her own. She's encountering the various menaces on her own. Now, she has companions almost every step of the way. She encounters the big bad wolf. She encounters Old Mother Hilda. She encounters Goldilocks and the Three Bears. She encounters all these different characters, and along the way she finds a bunch of different mentors, because that's what Book 1 is about. Book 1 is a coming-of-age story. Selena needs to grow up. She is a child at the start of the first book. She's whiny, she is self-centered, she is not interested in other people's opinions, she really doesn't care about other people's feelings. I mean, gosh, I'm raising a kid right now, and she's below the age of 10, but I see this constantly. We literally had a fight a few minutes ago before I sat down to record this. And she wanted to have a play fight with me, and I was like, no, we're not play fighting. You have to go see Grandma. Well, that wasn't good for her. She wanted to see it on her own. She wanted to do her own thing. And the more I pushed, no, you have to go see Grandma, the more she pushed back, well, I don't care what you want. I want to do what I want. And this escalated until she punched me. Now, she's 7, so she punched me in the stomach and I barely noticed. But it was the fact that she did that. So I had to put her in the corner, set the timer, and we all had to stand there and, with Grandma standing there, and we all had to wait for the 5 minutes to be up while she stood in the corner. And then afterwards, we talked about it a little bit. And, do you know why this was happening? Do you know why you were standing in the corner? And it's because I don't want my daughter to go down that path. But as a parent, there's not a lot I can do except enforce the rules and try not to crush her spirit, because I'm not an engineer, I'm a shepherd. I am creating an environment for my daughter to grow in with some rules that she can bounce off against, but she has to be able to grow in this environment that I have set up and find her own path eventually. And this first book is about that. It's about, in the start, Selena is pretentious. The Dunning-Kruger effect is in full effect. She thinks that she's amazing until she's like looking down the barrel of lots of reality, and then all of a sudden she's scared and doesn't know what to do. But she's very, very obstinate and, well, I'm going to do it this way because that's the way things should be done. And along the way, she has to talk to other people and deal with other people and, heck, take a few people under her wing who are even more unprepared than she is. And it's in caring for these other folks that she starts to realize, oh, wait a minute, the world is more complicated. So part 2 of Little Red Wolf is her first encounter with the Fairy Queen, followed by Goldilocks and the 3 Bears. And then she has to go on the Rapunzel story. The Rapunzel story I like a lot because she goes and rescues Rapunzel from her tower. She encounters Prince Charming, who's not charming, and not a prince. But anyway, she encounters this character who is the living embodiment of every patriarch nonsensical thing that we hate in fairy tales, where this guy is very entitled. He knows his fairy tale bride is supposed to look a certain way and is supposed to act a certain way and is supposed to instantly fall in love with him. And Selena doesn't fall into that because she's not pretty enough. She's not beautiful enough. She doesn't look the right way. She doesn't act the right way. So obviously, she cannot be his fairy tale bride. But he also talks about her like she's not a person. He wants his fairy tale bride. The property, the woman who's basically a trained animal who is at his beck and call and will do the things that he wishes her to do. Well, in future books, you'll discover that the woman he did choose, the Rapunzel character, ends up, while being his fairy tale bride, she kind of ends up being in charge later on. But that's another story. So part 3 of Little Red Wolf is after she's rescued Rapunzel and she goes to live with the Oracle, Baba Sophronia. That is the true part of Selena growing up. She's gotten away from her parents. She's gotten away from her village. She's in a place where she is literally training to go face a great evil. And she is effectively in college. She lives at her mentor's home. She's there constantly for lessons. They have daily discussions. She gets to go off into the wilderness and hunt to kind of, internalize and think about the lessons that they've had that day. It's the way, it's a college, only it's a mentorship. And Baba Sophronia is one of these, most of the Babas are these ancient creatures that have centuries under their belt, and so they've got all this knowledge and all this wisdom, and they're able to be very good mentors for these silly young people. And so part 3 of the book is completely in Baba Sophronia's home. And that's where I encountered the character of Jack. I'm going to devote an entire thing to Jack. He's fantastic. And then part 4 is the journey into the abyss. She voluntarily goes to the home of the monster, Bluebeard. She goes into the home of Bluebeard, and she faces him, and she survives. And she rescues her father, and she dies. Because that's the way the female hero narrative finishes. Selena is no more. She changes entirely. And at the end of that story, the person she becomes for book 2 is completely different from book 1. And that's where the story gets really interesting.